Hello, this is Mystery.
We're on the Isle of Anglesey in Wales.
And on today's show, what weird and spooky events took place in this ordinary car park?
And what links this mystery liquid to this photograph?
Hello, I'm Steve.
And I'm Shiarra. Today we're on the island of Anglesey in North Wales, and behind me is one of the oldest buildings on the island. Within these walls, criminals would have been sentenced to time in prison.
Not only sentenced to time in prison, but much worse than that, sentenced to death. Tell them why, Shiarra. Shiarra?
Order in this court. This is Beaumaris Courthouse. It was built in 1614, and in the past, this court would have dealt out all sorts of punishment.
There you are, Shiarra. Didn't recognise you. I'm now standing in the dock where the accused would have stood to face their punishment.
For instance, Steve, if I was sentencing you for stealing, you would have received a very public whipping.
It's a good job I'm not being accused of being a witch.
Yes, because then I would have sentenced you to have been strapped to a chair and plunged underwater. And if you didn't drown, you would definitely have been guilty of being a witch, and I would have had you burnt at the stake.
Nice. So, what am I being charged with then?
You are charged with the very serious crime of grievous bodily humour.
What does that mean?
It means you tell really bad jokes. How do you plead?
Not guilty. There's nothing wrong with my jokes. What do you call a sheep with no legs? A cloud. What do you call a fly with no wings? A walk.
Enough! Take him down while I judge my next mystery.
The Isle of Wight is one of the most beautiful parts of Great Britain. Its rugged coastline and picturesque countryside make it an ideal holiday destination. However, there is one area which has been the setting for some really bizarre goings-on. On the south side of the island is Ventnor, home to the Botanic Gardens. Now, when its car park was being built, Tom and Pete were busy trying to knock down the remains of an old wall.
Oh, this is ridiculous. It just won't budge.
Well, I've been on this bit all morning, and it's absolutely solid.
You know, they wrecked 4 tractors and a ball and crane the other day trying to demolish this.
I can't believe it.
The demolition and its associated mess had become a real upheaval for many of the locals.
I'm sick to the back teeth with all the comings and goings near me.
Down at the new car park?
I mean, I can cope with all the dust and noise from the demolition work, but there's some really strange noises coming from down there. It's the moaning, groaning, and the weeping I can't be doing with.
No.
Doris's Tom was doing a bit of work, trying to demolish a wall down there. And according to her, whenever Tom looked up, all he could see was a ghostly face staring at him as he worked.
Eventually, after a lot of hard work, the site was levelled and a car park built on top. But this was just the start of even more weird tales. Beneath the tarmac, a cable was laid to take power to a nearby tea shop. One day there was a mysterious power cut and the electricity board were called in.
Phil, come and have a look at this.
I don't believe it. How on earth?
So, what do you think lay in the trench?
Well, I reckon it was a skeleton or something.
No, unbelievably, what the men saw was a 10-centimetre thick cable, which had been neatly chopped into little pieces. Now, because it was so thick, it said it would be impossible for any normal human being to cut.
So, how was it done and who did it?
Nobody knows, and that's not all. A number of reports show that cars are constantly breaking down, something which the Robins are about to find out.
And don't forget, we must remember to visit the Needles tomorrow.
If we ever get there.
Have we run out of petrol?
No, I filled up at Shanklin this morning. I don't believe it. It's dead. The engine, the lights, everything. I have to get out and look under the bonnet.
After opening the bonnet, he still couldn't find anything wrong. Frustrated, he slammed it down again and was horrified at what he saw.
Sue, get out of the car, it's going to burst into flames. I don't believe it. It was full of smoke. The car was full of smoke just a moment ago.
Darling, now calm down.
So what was going on?
Well, the car park stands on the site where the operating theatre of the old Royal National Hospital at Ventnor once stood. It was demolished 30 years ago and it's now the home to the Botanic Gardens and its car park.
So why were they having so many problems knocking the walls down?
Well, because the car park was built on the site of the old operating theatre, it was those walls that were refusing to be torn down.
So maybe it was a case of the ghosts having fun with us then?
Yeah, maybe.
And the next stop for the prisoners would have been this building, the jail, and today it's said to be haunted by the tortured souls of the inmates. So, Steve, are you ready to serve your sentence?
No problem. I'll be out of here in no time.
Wow, look at the size of these keyholes. They're huge. They certainly didn't want anyone escaping from here, Steve. Steve?
I do not want to hang around in here for long. It's damp, spooky, and there's no heating. It's colder in here than it is outside.
Steve? This is the washroom where the new inmates would have been stripped and scrubbed using one of these hard brushes. And this foul-smelling soap, would have been used to get rid of all the lice. Then they would have changed into something like these, right up Steve's street.
Oh, I thought I found an escape route then, but this is the exercise yard. Prisoners would have walked around here to exercise in complete silence, something that Shiarra would find impossible. She never stops talking.
Up there you can see the doorway where the prisoners were hanged. Pretty gruesome stuff, hey? One story goes that in 1862, a man called Richard Rowlands was hung for a crime he swore he didn't commit. As they hung him, he cursed the church clock, and to this day it hasn't told the right time.
I thought this would be a good place to hide. This is the condemned cell. Prisoners who were sentenced to death would have spent their last few days here. Condemned cells were about twice the size of normal cells, and they had the added luxury of a fireplace. Oh, I've been hanging around waiting for you.
Hello, my name's Rochelle Fulcher, and I have a strange story to tell you about something that happened not far from where I live. I live in a place called Thorpe St Andrew. It's just outside the city of Norwich in Norfolk. Earlier this year, something really weird happened in our neighbourhood. It was a normal day and I'd gone to school as I always do. But when I returned home from school, I noticed that something extraordinary had happened. There, in one of my neighbour's gardens, was a massive hole, measuring 12 metres across and 5 metres deep. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I just couldn't work out how it got there. At first, no one had any idea of what could have caused such a huge hole. Since it happened, a lot of people have tried to find out what could have made it. I have investigated, and one explanation is that 20,000 years ago, huge blocks of ice were left under the ground. When the ice melted, big underground holes were left behind. It is thought that the ground on top of the cavern may have collapsed, leaving a massive hole behind. 1 minute everything seemed normal, the next there was a hole in my neighbour's garden. No one knows for sure why it appeared, and I don't think that they ever will.
Wow, how bizarre. Imagine coming home to find a big hole like that in your next door neighbour's garden.
Very, very weird. Okay, Shiarra, so you brought me to the kitchen. What kind of prison food would I have had here?
Well, back in the 19th century, you would have had a porridge-type dish called gruel, which you would have eaten for breakfast, lunch and dinner. And it would have been cooked in a big pot like this over a small fire.
Sounds like my grandma's cooking. Very gruel.
Don't be mean, Steve. I bet your gran's really proud of you.
She is actually. Sorry, Grandma.
Well, that reminds me of our next mystery in which a grandmother is equally as proud of her grandson, but with very extraordinary results.
Take a look at this. It was a lovely sunny afternoon when Philip Hatcher went to visit his sick grandmother. He had some important news for her.
Gran, there's something I want to tell you. All my life, you've encouraged me to think of other people, to be a good, honest, kind person. Well, now I've decided to put all of those things that you've taught me into practice. I'm going to become a vicar.
Oh, Philip, that's always been my wish. Your grandfather was a vicar, and so was his father. You've made me so happy, my dear. You've brought tears to my eyes.
Philip had never known his grandfather and wasn't aware that this would mean so much to his grandmother. Nevertheless, it was soon time to leave, so Philip said his goodbyes.
Goodbye, Gran.
Goodbye, Philip, my dear. Good luck.
Later, Philip was nearing the end of his studies to become a vicar and was about to graduate. Unfortunately, during his time at the college, his grandmother died, which made him even more determined to fulfill her wishes. Philip was so passionate about becoming a vicar, his enthusiasm spread throughout the college, and he became a role model to the younger students.
Come in.
Hi, Philip. I wondered if I could have a chat with you.
Of course, Tom, please, come in. Sit down. What's the matter?
Well, I've only been here a month now, and I'm not sure I'm doing the right thing anymore. Tell me, what inspired you to become a vicar?
Well, it all started with my grandmother. When I first told her that I was going to train to become a vicar, she cried. I'll never forget it.
Philip, what's this?
Well, it's water. Well, something's leaking.
So then, where do you think the water came from?
Had Philip spilt a glass of water on his desk earlier, got sidetracked and then forgotten to clean it up?
Now you're talking about something that you do, aren't you? Well, let's find out what really happened.
The men were baffled as to where the water had come from. There was no obvious leak and no spillage on the rest of the desk.
Look, there are two dribbles coming down the front of the photo. But it can't be.
What? What do you mean?
The water. It's underneath the glass. And it's coming from her eyes.
You mean she's crying?
What else can it be?
Good question. What else could it have been?
Could it have been condensation?
Hang on, if it was condensation, then all of the glass would have been covered, not just the eyes. The now Reverend Philip Hatcher truly believes the photo of his grandmother cried that night, unbelievable as it sounds.
What, are you trying to tell me that the photo of the grandmother cried the same tears of joy as the real grandmother?
Stranger things have happened. Statues all over the world are supposed to have cried, including one that's said to have drunk milk.
Ah, yeah, but I've heard about that and I can explain that. You see, that statue was made of a particularly absorbent stone so that when the liquid was placed to the mouth, the milk seemed to be literally sucked in.
Steve, aren't you milking this a bit?
Hey, be quiet, half pint.
Steve, do you really think it's possible to communicate from beyond the grave like Philip's granny?
Yeah, maybe. You know, some people think that in this very jail, if you stand still quietly, you can hear breathing behind you, and then when you turn around, there's no one there. Doors slam and other strange things happen.
What was that? I don't believe it, we're locked in.
What about the next mystery? Are we going to be out in time?
Your guess is as good as mine. You'll have to tune in to find out.
Actually, this reminds me of a joke. 2 people in prison.
See you next time.
Bye.
On our next show, what mystery stopped this Scottish lighthouse from working?
And we uncover what strange transformation was happening to this lady's dolls.